Welcome back. I hope you had a pleasant lunch break. This morning we learned about pharmacological interventions, then we moved on to non-pharmacological interventions. It's now time for digital therapies and assessment and interventions. And I can't think of anyone best suited to lead this session but Johns Hopkins and Champalimaud Foundation's very own neurologist, neuroscientist, and innovator, John Krakauer. John, please join me on stage.
Hi, everyone. That was really very nice. I have to get that recorded. So yeah, I thought what we're going to do this afternoon is continue sort of in the vein of non-pharmacological treatments that we heard before. I think the deep idea that I hope is going to continue to grow as we think about non-pharmacological interventions is that they're quite holistic. In other words, take exercise. Linda Fried, who was the head of public health at Hopkins, when she first coined the term frailty and started to think of exercise as an intervention, she actually contrasted exercise with drugs which try and be sort of targeted to a particular place and are monotherapeutic, with exercise which she by definition thought was a complex multi-scale intervention. And so you're not actually trying, Joaquim Ferreira mentioned this idea of a dirty intervention. The whole point is to be a dirty intervention, right? You want to be complex and multifactorial, and we'll be hearing more about that kind of approach as well. And then in addition, a sort of twinned binary star to the idea of complex multi-scale interventions is that your measurements have to be holistic and go beyond a particular target. It can't be like a hematocrit or a creatinine or a white blood cell count. You're going to have to come up with measurements that are themselves spanning multiple systems. And yes, you'd love to be able to sort of turn them into some form of scalar, but you have to be ingenious about what that scalar is derived from. And we'll be hearing about that kind of idea as well. So the final point is that if you do come up with these holistic interventions and measurements, then obviously they can be amplified and pushed and nudged by more targeted pharmacological interventions. So in other words, we're going to end up wanting some sort of multiplicative relationship between these two very different approaches. And I think that's what's exciting about having talks on these two different ways of going after the problem. And we have three people who are going to be talking about that. And first, we have Dr. Daniela Silva, who's been, actually, I'm biased, I've been working with her, and Joaquim Ferreira, who's been doing really very interesting work trying to both treat and track disease, Parkinson's disease in particular, in this new way. So please, come on up.
Thank you, John, for your introduction. So my name is Daniela Pimenta Silva. I am a neurologist and a PhD candidate at the University of Lisbon under the supervision of Professor Joaquim Ferreira. I am working on the rehabilitation of Parkinson's disease using virtual reality and exergaming devices. I want to thank the organizing committee for the invitation to present today. I am very honored to be here. So I will talk about the role of exercise in prevention and treatment in neurodegenerative disorders and appraise the added value of digital technologies, here specifically virtual reality. As my work is centered on Parkinson's disease, it will be also the focus of my presentation. I have nothing to disclose. So I will start with treatment. In Parkinson's disease, as in other neurodegenerative disorders, it is fundamental to approach a patient in a multidisciplinary way. As you may know, Parkinson's disease encompasses a wide range of motor and non-motor symptoms, including cognitive decline, neuropsychiatric features, and autonomic failure, and a multidisciplinary team and a multimodal management are required, which may include a combination all or a combination of pharmacological interventions, neurosurgical procedures, and non-pharmacological interventions where physiotherapy and clinical exercise play a major role. Physiotherapy guidelines recommend education, exercise, practice, and strategy training as physiotherapy interventions, focusing on 5 core areas: physical capacity, transfers, manual activities, balance, and gait. While meeting these 5 SMART goals, which means that exercise regimens should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. As there is no proof that one exercise is better than others, the recommendations are to engage people with Parkinson's disease in person-specific, enjoyable, and feasible exercise regimens, and to integrate various exercise modalities into a tailored PD-specific program. In this Cochrane systematic review that was already shown in the morning, comprising a wide range of physical exercise interventions, the authors concluded that there are beneficial effects on motor severity and quality of life for most types of physical exercise, and they support the idea that the exact type the exact exercise type might be secondary, provided that rehabilitation and motor learning principles are applied and that we consider the patient's needs and interests. I will not go into details on this, but there is good ground evidence from animal models of Parkinson's disease for the neuroprotective and neurorestorative role of exercise on increased synaptic length in basal ganglia and within its connections with the thalamus and the cortex, and also the improved global brain health, for which the aerobic exercise and the goal-based practice may have a synergistic effect. Exercises that are intense, specific to patients' goals, repetitive, difficult, complex, and variable are major assets for the physiotherapy programs for Parkinson's disease, and these are also the elements for experience-induced neuroplasticity. So regarding intensity and aerobic training, this phase 2 randomized control trial, the SPARKS trial, specifically powered for Parkinson's disease severity, showed that high-intensity treadmill exercise was feasible and attenuated worsening on the UPDRS motor score in a population of Parkinson's disease recently diagnosed and still unmedicated. And these results are very relevant because the group on usual care and moderate intensity, they continued to worsen throughout the 6-month study period, whereas this group has had an attenuating effect. So there is a dose effect for the exercise, aerobic exercise. And another high-quality, double-blind, randomized control trial further extended the results from the SPARKS trial by demonstrating that remotely supervised aerobic exercise in a stationary bicycle at home could also attenuate motor progression compared to a non-aerobic training, also during the 6 months. This study used gaming elements and a motivational app to further give positive feedback to the patients and motivate them to adhere to the complete protocol. So besides the important clinical effect, this study also shows the potential for digital technology to help facilitate access to exercise interventions in a home-based context and increase motivation to engage in long-term meaningful interventions. As I said before, aerobic training and goal-based practice may have a synergistic effect in enhancing neuronal circuitry between basal ganglia and its cortical and thalamic connections. So indeed, in one of the largest trials to date using virtual reality, the VII trial showed that combining treadmill training with virtual reality was more effective than treadmill training alone in reducing fall rates in elderly people with risk of falling. And specifically, the subgroup of Parkinson's disease, there was a fall rate decrease by 60%. They also improved in gait variability during obstacle negotiation, obstacle clearance, endurance, mobility, and quality of life. And so the hypothesis was that while treadmill training focused on the repetitive movements of the gait pattern, the virtual environment added the cognitive load, a very important one, a task-specific one, training cognitive pathways involved in obstacle negotiation, such as focused attention, planning, and multitasking. So the authors concluded that combining a motor and cognitive intervention would be beneficial to reduce fall rates in older adults and those with neurodegenerative conditions. Sub-studies of this VII project explored the neural correlates associated to these clinical improvements and further corroborate the importance of a motor cognitive intervention in Parkinson's disease, the complexity that John was talking about. In one study using functional MRI to investigate brain activation patterns under motor imagery paradigms, there was a decreased activation in frontal areas linked to executive function, which are normally more activated in Parkinson's disease due to compensatory mechanisms. Therefore, this may represent more efficient cognitive networks involved in multitasking and planning and attention. And these findings were replicated in another sub-study of VTIME using near-infrared spectroscopy, where treadmill training with VR led to a reduction in prefrontal activation in a greater extent than treadmill training alone, especially in complex walking conditions. So here I summarize the potential added value of virtual reality and exergaming in the rehabilitation of Parkinson's disease. While being able to offer the motor aspect of exercise, again, task specificity, intensity, difficulty, complexity, these devices may help optimize motor learning through multisensory stimulation, external cueing, through visual, auditory, and proprioceptive stimuli, enhanced feedback, providing knowledge about performance and results, dual task and cognitive challenges, and importantly, the motivation, interest, and reward that we were also talking about in the morning. So while I don't think the virtual reality and exergaming will substitute physiotherapy in the future, I do believe that it is a major asset for rehabilitation, especially in the context of such a complex disorders as neurodegenerative disorders. So back to the multidisciplinary model of care. In our center, patients have access to a wide variety of professionals and therapies extremely specialized in neurological disorders, offering the most specialized and individualized approach. And based on the benefits of high-dose exercise that I've just showed you, and the potential of VR to promote motor and cognitive challenges, we conducted a clinical trial in collaboration with MindMaze using a neuroanimation experience, the MindPod Dolphin, which, as you can see, uses a simulation of creatures, in this case in an oceanic environment, within which patients control a dolphin swimming by making large amplitude arm movements. And this is a very complex task they are doing, because while they are learning how to control the dolphin, which is not easy, by the way, patients are training big amplitudes, balance, dual tasking, visual spatial skills, eye motor coordination, and attention. And they are always given constant visual and auditory feedback, and this is a very enjoyable and challenging way of exercise. To complement neuroanimation, in our trial, we complemented with the PD specialized physiotherapy program. So this is our study design. We included 30 participants with mild to moderate Parkinson's disease without dementia and with low risk of falling. We randomly allocated patients into two groups. The sequential group, where patients had PD specialized physiotherapy program for 6 weeks, and then we added the neuroanimation experience for the following 6 weeks. And then the combined therapy, where patients had the same PD specialized physiotherapy protocol, and we added the neuroanimation from the beginning, so patients had 12 weeks of this combination. We had an extensive assessment protocol with a motor, cognitive, quality of life measures and kinematic measures, and we assessed patients at baseline at 6, 12 weeks and 4 weeks following the end of the intervention for, to assess for retention effects. With this design, we could investigate different combinations of exercise, and also, importantly, we assured that all participants would experience the neuroanimation software, which was important to manage expectations and reduce potential placebo effects. So first, we compared the first 6-week period of our trial. We compared PD specialized physiotherapy with its combination with neuroanimation, and this was our primary endpoint. Here, we could not demonstrate efficacy in our primary outcome, which was change from baseline in TEG, which measures functional mobility, and physiotherapy alone was superior in improving mini-best, which measures different aspects of balance and gait. However, when considering the whole 12-week intervention period, we showed that both groups improved in cognition, the sequential group continued to improve in balance, and the combined therapy improved in functional mobility in dual task conditions. However, we didn't find statistical differences between both groups. Finally, when extending the evaluation beyond the end of the program, here we found sustained improvements in both groups in several outcome measures. And importantly, when comparing both interventions, the neuroanimation-based exergaming was superior in improving functional mobility in dual task conditions. So in the first period of 6 weeks, physiotherapy improved balance. Then when we were adding physiotherapy and neuroanimation, there was a cumulative effect in improving functional mobility in this dual task condition. And in fact, using a repeated measure analysis of variance, we found a significant effect of time for TEG cognitive in the combined group, so the functional mobility with dual task condition. Then there was a significant effect of time for mini-best, so the balance for the sequential group, and both groups improved with time in cognition. In conclusion, therefore, our study demonstrated that both the combined and sequential interventions with MindPod Dolphin seem to be beneficial for people with Parkinson's disease with mild to moderate disease, with better outcomes once moving beyond the first 6 weeks, as well as better long-term effects when adding the complexity of neuroanimation. And our hypothesis is that MindPod Dolphin may have added to the benefits of exercise by cognitively engaging participants in tasks that demanded sustained attention, task shifting, eye motor coordination, and implicit learning. We also measured adverse events, and there were some adverse events, but they were mostly mild and considered unrelated to the intervention. And the system was considered easy to use. Most participants were at least moderately satisfied with the MindPod Dolphin, and they progressed through the levels, so further emphasizing that they were able to positively engage in the game. And this engagement is also represented here in this small video of a participant. One last comment on treatment is the concept of a secondary prevention model, which was introduced in this very interesting paper. As demonstrated here, all people with Parkinson's disease benefit from exercise and physiotherapy interventions since early stages. And there is even a glimpse into its potential disease-modifying effect. So the principle of this model is to start early with regular visits to physical therapists, as they do to a neurologist. And the physical therapists provide recommendations for exercises at home and adjust the exercise regimens accordingly and as needed, thus ensuring correctness, adherence, and safety. Due to its versatility, virtual reality and exergaming may play an important role in this model by keeping patients motivated to adhere to the longer protocols throughout the course of the disease, as a chronic disease, while potentiating the benefits of exercise. I believe this may be an important opportunity to place VR, exergaming, and digital technologies in the non-pharmacological management of Parkinson's disease. So finally, a word about prevention, and we have already talked about prevention in the morning, so this will be more a general word to everyone seated here in this room. I believe none of us could miss the impressive work that organizations like the World Federation of Neurology, the European Brain Council, the European Academy of Neurology, and the World Health Organization are doing to make brain health a top priority in academic, research, political, and public contexts. And as we were saying in the morning, this is a public health problem, so we have to bring it to our communities. And of course, one of the pillars of this work has been raising awareness about the importance of exercise and physical activity in prevention, including in prevention of cognitive decline and dementia as a determinant of brain health. And why is this important? Because 1 in 3 people suffer from a neurological disorder, which is the leading cause of disability worldwide. With dementia being the 4th condition contributing to the greatest disability. Moreover, we know the modifiable risk effects, so we can act on them and prevent dementia. Regarding physical inactivity, this 2024 update from the Lancet Commission showed that global dementia prevalence could be reduced by 2% if physical inactivity was eliminated. So we have to shift from physical inactivity to physical activity, which has shown to decrease vascular damage, dementia neuropathology, stress and inflammation, and also build cognitive and brain reserve and prevent and delay dementia. Once again, there is evidence from neurobiological, structural, and functional neuroimaging and clinical outcomes of the beneficial effects of physical exercise on brain health. And the World Health Organization recommends exercise to everyone, from childhood to late in life to people with disabilities, so everyone is a good candidate to exercise. And they even identified the main health outcomes, and in adults and older adults, physical exercise improve all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, incident hypertension, site-specific cancers, type 2 diabetes, mental health, cognitive health, and sleep. So it's really something that we should do all. The role of exercise in reducing the risk of Parkinson's disease is less well established, but several observational cohorts provided this association. Furthermore, the role of virtual reality and exergaming in prevention on neurodegenerative disorders is even less known. However, a complex intervention like the one provided by virtual reality and exergaming, with its potential to enhance traditional physical exercise, might be a promising area of research as well. I want to thank my team, and especially Professor Joaquim Ferreira and John seated here in the audience, and I want to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Like precision timing. Questions? Well, if you're all too shy, I think it's very important for people to understand the difference between exercise and sport, for example, right? I mean, most people don't like exercising. Most people like sport. In a way, exergaming is a new sport, right? A large number of the people watching exergaming and doing it, and VR. So you would agree, right, that a sport has exercise in it, but an exercise is not a sport. So in other words, it suggests that you need more than just cardiovascular workout. You need to be cognitively challenged, you need to be having fun, and presumably you need to be acquiring a skill. Mm-hmm. So do you think it's the fact that one is a subset of the other, which is going to explain in the end why having them all is going to be better on the nervous system, not just time on task.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, because only exercise seems good, but if we add complexity, we are cognitively engaging ourselves, and so we may have better outcomes. But also we have to take into account the interests of every one of us. Maybe there are people that don't like to do gaming, and so these specificities for each individual person should also be taken into account.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question? No? Okay, Daniela, take a hot seat. Okay, so now for something completely different. So Arko Ghosh is a kind of a extraordinary kind of scientist, works in Leiden. I've had the great pleasure of starting to work with him, and he is going to show you something which I think is really quite brand new, right? It's original, it's provocative, and hopefully it's true. So Arko, come on up.
Thanks, John. And I really had a great day today. It was really fun. The hotel was great. The breakfast was good. I had a walk around the hotel. And as you can tell from the clothes I'm wearing, I'm not a clinician. So I really had a good time today. And even the talks that I heard were really fantastic. So all these experiences that I had, my behavior, they're all generated by my brain, and wouldn't it be amazing if I could have captured these behaviors that I was engaged in and say something about how my brain is doing, right? And that is ultimately what my group in Leiden is trying to resolve. Now, let me just check. Oops. Trying to go to the next slide. Oh, there's this thing? That's high tech, okay. This is all about technology. Good. So I'm nothing without my family, and this now also includes John, given that he has helped us so much in the last year or so, discussing the ideas we have. And our group is really built with some enthusiastic people who all care about this problem of real-world behavior deeply. And we do work with a range of researchers cutting across domains. And we'll talk a little bit about each of their contributions in this domain. Now, very simply put, we really want to develop an understanding of the brain, but through the lens of behavior. So when you think of the brain and understanding it, you often think about, let's directly measure the brain. Let's isolate it. Let's give it a task. And you will then go and do an EEG or fMRI or even get a brain scan or multilateral recordings, and you're trying to just get to some measure of the brain. But then how can we really look at function of the brain in terms of its behavior, and how can we interpret what that is telling us about the brain? And that is the challenge. It's not a trivial challenge, actually, and what we will try to do today is kind of run down this challenge by first recognizing the problem that is posed by real-world behavior. Then we'll try to tether this unknown domain to things we know. But this is the cool part. Ultimately, we will try to learn things that we would have never imagined we would learn otherwise, to really go to the unknown. Now, how do I illustrate to you the problem of real-world behavior? And now this is from one of my favorite artists in pre-independent India, Amrita Sher-Gill. And in this painting, she's capturing daily life, like people living. Now, if I'm a quantitative behavioral science person, I would be thinking, okay, what do I quantify? Do I quantify, if I'm trying to quantify this lady carrying this, pot on her head, do I quantify the tilt angle, the forces on the finger, the pot is tilted in a certain way, or when the behavior began, or how much water there is in the pot? What do I do? There's so many things I could look at. It is so diverse. So essentially, It all boils down to two issues. There's so many levels, one, and it is so diverse, right? Now, let's solve one problem at a time. There's so many levels, let's make a choice. At that time, when I was thinking of this problem, I was immersed in an environment where timing was everything, which was basically things like spike timing, your neuronal spikes, or your reaction times. Everything had to do with some aspect of timing. So I decided, this was a bit arbitrary, I admit, that the level that I will focus on to develop the understanding would be based upon the timing as to when you initiate a certain behavior, right? That would be my level. Just like, if you're a biologist, you choose, will you study systems biology or molecular biology? I think even behavioral science will often force us to choose the level of understanding, at which level you want to develop it. And this was great, because at the same time, you have smartphones where you're constantly tapping away, and it is very easy to derive, just conceptually, timing from that behavior, because you're just tapping away on your phone, so tap, 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 tap. Well, if I want to develop an understanding of that, it will be simply looking at the timing of when I've initiated all these touchscreen touches in your daily life. Well, how do we deal with the issue that there's so many diverse things that you do, even with your phone, from dating to banking, they're different things, to social networking. And now, given that there are all these diverse behaviors that you engage in, what do we do with them? The solution we came up with is to simply temporarily separate out the behaviors. Now, this is a crucial part of my talk, and I hope I don't lose you. I hope I haven't lost you already, but I hope I don't lose you, because if you understand this bit, it'll help us carry through all the rest of the talk. Now, when you have a lot of diversity in behavior, one avenue would be to go with intuition and say, hey, let me classify if you're banking or dating, or if you're texting. This is almost what an ethologist would do in biology, but in ethology, you often have very clear biological functions of the behaviors you're classifying. Here we don't. So the other alternative is, let that intuition be parked, and let's look into the temporal structures in behavior. Now, what does that mean? So imagine you have tap, tap, tap on your phone, and this is happening all the time. Whole day and night, when you're not sleeping, you're just tapping away on your phone. And the way we would analyze that is in the following manner. So please bear with me, and let's try to understand this. So imagine you go tap, 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 3 rapid touches. You're really quick, one after the other. The way I would represent this is basically, you have 3 rapid touches. So you would go to a different space where you're looking at what you did and what will you do next. So if you had 3 touches right after each other, you would basically occupy this orange spot because you had short intervals followed by a short interval. Now let's take the next 3. You had tap, tap, and then a long gap, and then a tap. This would be basically tap, tap, and then a long gap, and the taps will occupy this part of that particular space. Now, if you imagine this was a short sequence of events, you could kind of represent this particular behavioral structure using this representation. Really capturing and separating out the diverse things that you're doing, but based on the next interval properties of your behavior. So very intuitively, this part of the behavior is all about rapid things, tap, 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 This part may be about transitioning between rapid things to slow things. These parts may be about just doing slow things after each other. Okay? Did I communicate that? Okay. So now that we have a way to capture these diverse behaviors, this is how one person's behavior captured over 6 months looks like. Just install an app on their phone. It just captures the timing of the touches, nothing else. It doesn't care about what you're texting, what you're writing. And what you see here is that this person generates a huge range of behaviors. The blackish spots, they're also actually covered with data, which you don't really see here with your projector, but there's a lot of rapid touches as well. Intuitively, they may be on WhatsApp, typing away, generating tap, 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 where one tap, a short interval follows a next short interval, right? So each of us would have such an image describing how their behavior is, capturing everything that you do. Now, what can you do with it? And what have you done already? I will quickly brush aside an overview and then dive deep into a few things that we have done. Now, given that each of us has such an image of behavior, we can correlate it, for example. For example, what we have done in Holland is we have close to 800 people who are in a platform who have donated their smartphone data to us. And at the same time, they would have performed cognitive tests, like reaction times or task switching, all kinds of kind of so-called controlled cognitive testing. And based on that, you can basically look into your smartphone behavior and say, hey, these parts of the behavior correlate with my more sophisticated executive functions. These corners correlate with a range of things, including sensory motor aspects. Also, just based on the interval timings of touches, you can very well detect sleep behavior and sleep patterns because, as you might guess, when you're sleeping, you can't touch your phone. So you can really develop a very, a simple longitudinal ways to assess sleep using just your interactions on your smartphone. But let's dive deep into something perhaps a bit more provocative. Now, I had spent my undergraduate years carrying epileptic tissue from Dennis Spencer's surgery room to the pathologist as an undergraduate job. So I took advantage of that undergraduate job when I was, a long time ago, and I reached out to my old, researchers that I knew at Yale, who basically had patients implanted with responsive neural stimulators, which basically you can implant it in people's heads, and then they essentially record and stimulate at the same time, but they basically record these little seizure-like brain episodes which are taking place, interictal discharges or epileptiform discharges taking place. That's what these devices can help you do. And of course, I wanted to know, well, is there a mapping between the small interictal discharges in the brain and the behavior that we are capturing on the smartphone? And what I precisely mean by that is, remember, I told you everybody has this image of how your behavior is. But it's not just everybody. You can generate it at any time. So for instance, this is one patient with such an implant, who has such an implant, and this is just their behavior evolving over several days. Okay? So then what we did is we took these behaviors that they were engaging in and that they were capturing, mapped it using artificial neural networks, and ultimately, what we were able to do is the following. It's also just fun to watch this behavior going on. So you might be looking at your smartphone behavior very differently after today. Now, this is one of the patients where we have trained the model to kind of find the mapping between smartphone behavior and epileptiform discharges in the brain, which the patient is typically unaware of, and they normally don't have any detectable behavioral issues because of those epileptiform discharges which are being picked up. But what the model is doing is looking at the behavior and predicting what would be the nature or number of epileptiform discharges this person would experience at somewhat of an hourly resolution. And what you essentially see is that a detector in magenta is nicely followed by the predictions by the model in black. So just based on behavior, we're able to pick up these little kind of discharges which are taking place in a specific part of the brain, which is already pretty amazing. But this does not work in every single patient that we trained. Worked really well in 3 out of 8, and others were rather mediocre. And these were based on years of data, a year or 2 years of data from each person. Now, so far, the approaches that I've shown you, that we're looking at something unknown, something mysterious, and trying to link it to something we kind of know. May it be a cognitive task, may it be sleep, or may it be interictal discharges. But that creates a little problem, And that is, we kind of artificially constrain what we can discover by tethering it to the known. This way we can never really easily discover stuff that we don't know, right? And essentially, like, it's polarizing our view of behavior. So how do we learn from behavior without these reductions? And one way to do that is, I'll show you an approach as to how we have reached one, kind of crucial learnings based on that. And this work is really inspired by the work of Tom Weher in psychiatry and Maxim Baud in epilepsy, where what they were discovering is that people with psychiatric conditions or epilepsy have rhythms. In epilepsy, you might have 24-hour cycles or other multi-day rhythms. In mood disorders, you have kind of fluctuations which are happening rather rhythmically. And that kind of inspired us to think, well, what about in general behavior? Do we also have rhythms? Now, the cool thing is this. You already are familiar with this beautiful image of the joint interval distribution. Now, you can imagine that every single behavior or every single type of temporal dynamics in one bin, if you were to do this every hour, you can create a joint interval distribution. You can imagine you'll have fluctuations in that, in the probability of occupying that bin as you record data over years. You can kind of believe that, right? So you basically have, if you look into one behavioral type, it'll change as to how probable it is as life goes on. Now then you can ask, hey, so if you look into that behavior, do they oscillate? And then you can use continuous wavelet transforms or other simple ways to look into oscillations. And then what you see here is, for example, in this person, in that behavior, there's a 1-day rhythm hidden in there, and an interesting 21-day and a 32-day rhythm hidden in there. Great, we can do it for one two-dimensional bin, but no, we can actually do it for all the two-dimensional bins and ask, where are the 1-day rhythms present in your behavior? Where are the 20-day rhythms present in your behavior? Where are the 32-day rhythms present in your behavior? And this way, what we are discovering here are essentially that these rhythms which we thought were pathological or pathologically related just happen in everyday healthy people. And they happen at many more multi-day periods than we had originally thought. So this is really an avenue for us to try and discover what they mean, how do they relate now going back to psychiatry and other disorders where things are rhythmic in terms of disease activity. This is just showing you how consistent these are across the population that we are sampling between both males, men and women. And these numbers are sorted by age, so our sample goes from 18 years old to 86 years old, and they all show these multi-day behavioral rhythms which they are expressing. Now, very, very quickly, to condense this, we want to now show you one last approach where we're able to learn something about behavior by combining the two approaches. One, we will leverage the interpretability of a known process. Second, we will basically look at a time series of these fluctuations of the inferred process and then finally model it to learn something about behavior. Now, the way it goes is this. I told you everybody has an image like this representing their behavior. We can train a model which can basically look at your behavior and say how old you are. I hope you're not very uncomfortable about that. The good news is some of you may have an older age, but your behavior might look younger. So there's hope. Now, this is how the model performs. This is across the population, where you're just sorting subjects by age, and the model is pretty good at predicting and telling us how old you are. Great. This becomes even more interesting when we realize that if you did the same in people with stroke or epilepsy, the model actually says their behavior looks way older than they actually are, just like a brain MRI scan does. In epilepsy, it is roughly a 10-year gap between how old you are. So if you're like 40, you behave as if you're 50, and your brain also looks as if it is 50. In stroke, the advance is roughly 6 years. Isn't that remarkable? Just using your smartphone behavior, we're able to pick up this gap between your so-called behavioral age and chronological age. But then you can actually do this every single day. every single day I can update the model based on the differences in my behavior, and I can see what your behavioral age is doing over a long period of time. These are your age-related fluctuations just taking place over time. It's pretty complicated. Now, how do we gain and develop an understanding of these complicated fluctuations? We just borrowed ideas from our colleagues in Wageningen who really study forests. And forests, like brains, are complex systems, and they often go through different states where suddenly a lush green forest can become a very difficult, barren land. And to study these state transitions, they have developed these mathematical modeling methods where, based on a time series of values, you can interpret what are the different states that the system is occupying and how hard is it to go from one state to the other. And we applied that same math onto our data. And what we're able to do then is convert the behavioral age time series into a landscape indicating, hey, for this particular person, they easily occupy a 60-year-old state, but sometimes they go and visit a 50-year-old state, and it's pretty hard for them to cross over that hill. And if this was deeper in valley, the harder it would be for them to cross over and behave younger. And essentially, based on these modeling, you can figure out how quantitatively, how easy and hard is it for you to transition from older to younger states and from younger to older states in behavior that you're generating. And it turns out, this is a little bit of bad news, as you age, you basically lose some of the ability. It becomes much harder for you to behave younger. So you sometimes do go and visit younger states, but it just becomes much harder to cross this hill here because your stable values are much deeper. So you're basically, as you get older, it becomes harder and harder to kind of sometimes go and visit your younger states. But here's the good news. There are young states that you go and visit from time to time. And the converse is true as well. But these modelings are not black box models. You can go and dissect them and figure out which parts of the joint distribution are making you look younger in your behavior versus look older in your behavior as well. So finally, our key learnings are, right now, that real-world behavior can be interpreted. It is possible to interpret them. Secondly, we're moving away from inter-individual differences to long-term intra-individual differences. And finally, these long-term measurements are key to detect these slow states, which might really be informative about how you're trapped in a valley where it is very hard to get out of. But there's always hope by crossing over to a more desirable state. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks to the funders for funding all this work. Thank you.
So are there any burning questions? Otherwise, we'll try and have a nice conversation at the end. But if there is one, please. Joe.
Hi, really interesting, Arko. Can you just give us a quick intuition about what maps onto that age estimate? Is it just movement along the diagonal? Is it something simple like that?
No, so sorry. So the thing is that when we looked into the models as to what is it that is making you look younger or older or giving a younger age prediction, a lot of the weight is in fact on your fast consecutive intervals, sustaining those, but this is in logarithmic scale. So we're not talking about sustaining millisecond level fast consecutive behavior, but milliseconds to seconds level fast consecutive intervals. But at the same time, we also see there's certain specific transitions behaviors which suddenly pop up in younger, they're capable of doing those that you're not capable of. But the picture is not that simple, as you see based on the shapely plots that I showed.